All right, Adam, we said that we, in this episode, talk about 6 things, 3 each, that we found over the last 51 shows that we thought were really interesting about social. And I'm going to bring up one that not only do I find really interesting that we talked about a lot this year, but it's something that we've actually incorporated a lot into our work at Convince and Convert as consultants. And it's this idea of getting away from random acts of social and really using social media as a series of shows. So a LinkedIn show, an Instagram show, a Facebook show, episodic, repeatable content that you continue to execute on in that particular platform, which not only allows your content calendar to be a little bit more organized, but also gives your fans and your audience something to look forward to. They know that on a regular basis, you do this thing. This is your shtick, if you will, on that particular platform. Instead of just sort of randomly talking about news and updates and events from your company, we find that it works much, much better. Episodic social content and social media shows. Thoughts on that?
I like the idea, and I think it's a strong one. And as you said, it helps with the creation and curation of content as you look at that social media and just traditional media editorial calendar. My question to you is, and this is in no by means me trying to get away from that, because I think that is without a doubt the most strong, sound strategy. So many of the guests that we've had on, especially this year, have talked about the idea of making sure that the content on each platform is tailored to that platform. I think we even talked about this idea of it being custom fit and custom purpose for each one. So my question back to you about that is, how do you create episodic social content when you are a brand that is on multiple channels? And do you have them kind of crisscross with the assumption that maybe some of your audience is going to cross over from Facebook to Twitter to Instagram? Or do you kind of create 3 kind of parallel tracks of episodic content?
Great question. It's one that we actually talk about a lot here at Convince and Convert on the strategy team. So generally what we do when we create social media shows, and this could be content shows as well, but for purposes of today's broadcast, social media content, we will say that this particular show is native to one channel, right? So it is intended for LinkedIn. It is intended for Instagram. It is intended for Snapchat. And then we will typically also broadcast that show on one other channel. Right, we'll make some adjustments to it, and also put it one other place, the place that's the greatest overlap, the sort of Venn diagram of the audiences. And then after that, any additional kind of slosh over from channel to channel has to come from the audience itself. My question I have for you, Adam, is there a cap on Instagram's ultimate size? So the reason Facebook is so enormous is that it is the de facto social network for people who really aren't that technical or don't really love social media or computers or anything else, right? Like my mom uses Facebook. Now, my mom has an Instagram account, I believe. She's probably watching. She'll probably correct us in the comments. But I don't think my mom's ever posted to Instagram, but I think she just looks at pictures that I post there and my kids and my wife. Will that ever happen, right? Because to be the biggest guy in the game, you have to be the de facto social network for my mom. And I don't know if Instagram can cross that chasm, or even if they want to cross that chasm.
Well, I think you've hit on 2 interesting things. I think one is that ratio of consumption and content production. And without a doubt, Facebook is an easier production from a kind of I think a general standpoint. I think the perception is to be on Instagram is more about that user creating content. I think the other aspect, and I want to come back to that in a second, but I think the second piece of this is just the longevity of Facebook, with it having at least 8 years of head start in front of Instagram. I think that's going to have and continue to have that de facto-ness that you spoke to. But I think the 2 pieces that are interesting to me are, number one, that the perception, and sometimes the reality is, it's harder to create content on Instagram. And can you become the de facto when you have less people creating content than just lurking or consuming content? And number 2, my perception, and some of the advertising notes that I've seen, there seems to be less newsfeed / IG feed advertising on Instagram than I see on my news feed on Facebook. And I think they have found the right balance of that for at least for the feed that I see on each platform.
The third thing I want to talk about on trends is this idea of dark social, and that we have been talking about here for not the entirety of the podcast lifespan, but certainly for the last 6 or 7 years, primarily about social media as a broadcast mechanism, right? The ability to reach more people. In fact, reach, and I'm throwing my air quotes here, reach is actually a success metric in many social platforms. And so the ability to reach many people or more people than you reached last time has been one of the stated goals of most social programs for a long time, regardless of channel. But I think we're going to see in 2020, and we already started to see it a little bit this year, some rethinking of that proposition, that maybe instead of trying to reach as many people as we can with social, because when you think of that way, it's really more media than it is social, that maybe one of the angles is to say, well, what if we reached a smaller number of people with a more consistent personalized message? And what that brings to the forefront, Adam, are things like Facebook groups, which to me is the most important part of the classic Facebook experience, really, is groups now. So Facebook groups, and then the whole idea of dark social, which includes Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, which is gaining a lot of popularity in the U.S. now after being very, very popular in other parts of the world, and Instagram DMs. Now, Facebook has said that they are combining in some way, shape, or form Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and Instagram DMs into some sort of Uber messaging platform. Now, that has not been launched yet, but I am very curious to see what becomes of that, because I think that could be a true powerhouse and could end up being one of the primary, most important platforms that brands and organizations use in their social efforts overall.
When you started this show in 2012, 400 episodes ago, we could pretty accurately say that the majority of people who were listening to the show, majority of the people who had social in their job title, were marketing or communications people. And that is certainly not the case today. And I think it is, kind of personified with what you just said. If you have this one app that's doing transaction, that's doing customer care, that's doing your marketing, that may be doing reminders for a service appointment to get your oil changed, that may be doing all these different aspects, it means we as social professionals have to understand all of those things. We have to be more nimble, and this isn't that one proverbial fax machine that's sitting in the middle of the office that everybody uses.
Man, that is such a great point. That is one of the most astute observations I have ever heard you make. It is so smart, because what it really means is that the social media professional becomes a customer experience professional. Mm-hmm. And that's a different bill of goods, man. That's a different that's a different set of responsibilities. That's a different background, because ultimately, as you said, when the kind of social platforms become the transactional and the customer care platforms, you have to be thinking end to end, not just customer acquisition, not just customer advocacy, which is really where social came from, but all the different steps of the customer journey. And I'll just say this for Social Pros listeners out there: if you're not spending time looking into customer experience, deep customer experience work,
UX,
if you're not paying attention to UX, CX, DX, customer journey mapping, deep persona work, that kind of research, you need to, because that train is coming down the tracks. And the CX folks and the social media folks are going to merge eventually, partially, as Adam so smartly pointed out, because the technology is going to make it happen.